The hunt for alien life. It is an endeavor that has inspired scientists to send data collecting rovers to the surfaces of other planets. Astronomers have listened out across the sky with radio telescopes. Messages and data carrying satellites have been launched out the other way. Countless people have poured countless hours into searching for even the slightest signs that we are not alone. We have done all this because in the infinite vastness of our universe, it is incomprehensible to some of us that we represent the only time that life has arisen. And it would be the profoundest discovery humanity has made so far if we learned that we are not. Of course, there are many people out there who claim that while humanity has been seeking evidence of alien life, that same life has been spending its time seeking to discover us. Some have claimed that aliens have already visited us, and are even here currently, hiding and invisible. Here, sadly, the evidence starts to get questionable. There have been so many hoaxes, faked videos filmed on grainy, shaky cams, or even genuine mistakes where natural phenomena or satellites are taken for UFOs, that many people are now a little wary of entertaining such theories. There have even supposedly been times where the US government has deliberately, subtly propagated UFO conspiracy stories to draw attention away from their real top-secret technological projects, like the stealth bomber. All in all, ascribing extraterrestrial origins to these phenomena is often factually incorrect and poor science, and because we do not understand something does not mean we should jump to the idea that it must be aliens. And yet, if that's true, why did NASA, the US Navy, and other agencies in the US government join forces in 2022 to discover the growing number of UFO sightings? The answer surprised me. It's because it turns out they have no reasonable choice. There is now such a growing wealth of evidence, good, sound, scientific evidence from multiple powerful detection devices, and reliable, regular military pilot accounts of phenomena that cannot be explained by modern technology or our understanding of science, that the rational thing to do is to investigate with an open mind. However strange it might be to admit, it is no longer reasonably possible to do anything but agree that something weird is going on. Now, it is only a question of asking, what could it be? I'm Alex McColgan and you're watching Astrum, and today I will show you exactly what has caused the US government to start taking unidentified flying objects meandering through their skies much more seriously. The first UFO sighting in modern times was by an American businessman named Kenneth Arnold in 1947. As he looked out across Mount Rainier, Arnold claims he saw 9 crescent-shaped silver objects traveling at several thousand kilometers per hour through the air. He likened them to saucers skipping on water in the way that they moved. He initially thought they might be secret military jets, but later he and other witnesses of these crescent craft wondered if they might have been extraterrestrial in nature. The media picked up his turn of phrase about the saucers, and the idea of flying saucers entered the national consciousness. Before long, other people started reporting alleged UFO encounters. The US became enraptured with the idea of UFOs. However, the US military did not take this idea quite so seriously. While initially they were understandably alarmed at the report of unknown aircraft moving around in their airspace, particularly coming right after World War II, the programs they set up to investigate UFOs were eventually shut down in 1969. Project Blue Book, the last of these programs, collected 12,618 UFO reports, but ultimately concluded that they were almost all misidentifications of natural phenomena or just man-made aircraft. With such a damning report to go on, the US government officially pulled funding from the project, and investigation into UFO sightings officially ceased. Partly as a result of Project Blue Book's findings, a certain degree of stigma became associated with seeing a UFO. Anyone who claimed to have done so was often ridiculed or considered crazy. It came down to a question of evidence. If aliens were real and were visiting our planet, where was the proof of their evidence? Of course, to answer that, we need to define what we would consider to be reliable proof. Let's imagine that a person came up to you and claimed that they'd seen a silver disc shoot across the sky at a speed far faster than any airplane was capable of. Would you consider a single person's account to be proof that he'd seen an alien spacecraft? Well, not necessarily. Human memory is unreliable. Even if you trust the character of the person in question enough to believe that they weren't lying to you, they might be misremembering details, or maybe had misjudged how fast the spaceship they saw was going due to some optical phenomenon. "Ah," they cry, "but I recorded it on film." You look, but unfortunately, the video they provide is grainy and only gives you a blurry glimpse of the spacecraft. Is that proof? Again, you might well be skeptical. Even if this video is not a deliberate hoax, and it's so easy to fake film these days, it could be a digital artifact or some broken pixel in the camera, and it could just be some natural or man-made phenomenon neither of you had seen before. So what would be a good proof of alien spacecraft? Ideally, for me, I would like evidence that was seen by multiple trustworthy people, the more the merrier. It would need to be recorded by multiple pieces of hardware to eliminate the risk of it being glitchy technology, and it would have to evidence characteristics that completely ruled out it being any man-made phenomenon or natural event. Best of all, it would be repeatable. If it kept occurring, it would provide more opportunities for study to rule out other causes. Which brings us to the event that started things all off again, in 2004 and the USS Nimitz. The Navy aircraft carrier was traveling through the ocean near Southern Carolina in November of that year on a routine training exercise. Another nearby vessel, called the USS Princeton, had recently received upgrades to its radar and had started noticing strange aircraft in the area. These crafts descended from 80,000 feet to 20,000 in a blistering speed, before vanishing out of sight entirely or later shooting back up again. After a few days of this, the Princeton called the Nimitz, asking them to send someone to see what was going on. Two FA-18F Super Hornet jets were scrambled. Each jet had a weapons camera, but no weapons, as this was only meant to be a training exercise. Each jet had 2 pilots on board. Upon arriving at the scene, all 4 pilots quickly spotted what they were looking for. A strange, tic-tac shaped object was moving weirdly, zipping back and forth above a frothy, boiling patch of water in the sea below them. It had no visible means of propulsion, no wings, no rotors. It was about the size of a jet and a whitish color. The object suddenly stopped its zigzag. It had seen them. It whipped around and traveled up towards the jets as if it were intending to meet them in the air, but then rapidly accelerated away, faster than anything the pilots had ever seen before. Baffled by what they'd witnessed, the pilots returned to base, only for the radio operator to inform them that they'd begun tracking the craft again, except it was now over 60 kilometers away. It had got there in under a minute of leaving the pilot's view. This was an object seen by 4 trained professional pilots on the clock, aircraft cameras, and modern, advanced ship-based radar from one of the most technologically advanced nations in the world. This ticks many of the boxes for good, reliable sources of evidence. This report was logged, and nothing else was initially done with it. You might just point to this being a strange story if it wasn't for this authenticated footage that we have of it, confirmed by the US government in a Freedom of Information request. But the strangest thing about this was that it kept happening. The phenomenon is currently repeating. Navy and Air Force pilots were spotting strange objects in the sky so frequently, some were claiming that it was almost a daily occurrence. Many were embarrassed to mention what they'd seen, fearing ridicule. That said, it became so common that the Navy started handing out cards to be kept in Navy pilot kneeboards in their cockpits about what to do in the event of such a sighting. Between 2004 and 2021, 144 reports came in from Navy personnel of seeing unidentified objects in the sky, 80 of them being observed by multiple sensors, 11 accounts of near misses with jets, and only ever one being positively identified. Between 2021 and 2022, sensing that there might be something to all this after all, the Navy began destigmatizing reporting and started actively encouraging its pilots to record what they saw. 247 new reports came in, and an additional 119 incidents were reported to have happened in the past. Sure enough, that's almost one every other day. In total, the number of unidentified objects had risen to 510. So, what were these objects? Their natures and probably their origins varied. Some behaved like drones, with the Navy detecting radio signals coming to and from them. Only, they stayed up in the air far longer than any drone on the market was capable of doing. Some were more like aircraft, traveling in formations, exhibiting unheard of acceleration. Some could both fly and submerge underwater, seemingly at will. Some acted like balloons, albeit with unknown means of remaining up in the air, sometimes defying wind currents by remaining completely motionless or even moving against it. No doubt, of those 510, some will simply be glitches in technology. This strange triangle in the sky is thought to not really be that shape. Instead, the unique design of the night goggles is thought to be distorting the light in this apparent drone, in a similar effect to lens glare, but uniquely tailored to this technology. However, it's still concerning that the Navy does not know what these drones were doing circling a US Navy vessel while it did training exercises at night. The Navy started calling these objects UAPs, or Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, in the hopes of removing the negative connotations associated with UFOs. And this has changed again recently to Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. And while they do not want to assume that this is alien in origin, they're also not ruling it out. They reported their findings in a congressional hearing on the 17th of May 2021, and now are regularly, and somewhat transparently, publishing reports for the general public about the ongoing investigation, provided it doesn't give away too much about classified sources or technology they are working on. Right now, they are attempting to collect as much data as possible, knowing that it will lead to better science. And that right there is the biggest shift of all. When you see the US government reaching out to the wider community to ask, what are these things we keep seeing? It certainly confirms that there is something to see. All in all, it certainly makes you wonder. Of course, all this might end up being technology belonging to rival nations. After all, governments around the world are always developing new, secret technologies, and they are hardly likely to admit to them. However, it's telling that America does not seem to believe that these things are theirs, according to the UAP Task Force's report. Neither do they know of them belonging to other countries. Perhaps I'll leave you with this final quote by NASA Chief Bill Nelson. NASA is one of the agencies working with the UAP Task Force to figure out the nature and origins of these phenomena. They are lending the task force experts to help rule out any natural phenomena that NASA is aware of.
And they don't know what it is, and we don't know what it is. We hope it's not an adversary here on Earth that has that kind of technology. But it's something. And so this is a mission that we're constantly looking. Who is out there? Who are we? How did we get here? How did we become as we are? How did we develop? How did we civilize? And are those same conditions out there in a universe that has billions of other suns in billions of other galaxies? It's so large, I can't conceive it.
But what do you think? Could these phenomena have innocent, human explanations? Or are you convinced that there's something more to them? Something that can only be explained by alien life? Post in the comments below what you think and let me know if you've enjoyed this topic. If so, I can explore this subject more, particularly when the US government releases their next report later this year. If aliens ever do make contact with humanity, assuming things don't immediately devolve into all-out war, we may in time form some kind of trade relations with them. If that ever happens, and for all we know it could just be around the corner, you'll want to have your business ready and running. And what better way to stay on top of your business than through Odoo, the sponsor of today's video. Odoo is an all-in-one management platform that contains all the business apps you need in one place, whether that's accounting, website, project management, sales, CRM, and more. Each app talks to each other, making it easy to stay on top of your business. The invoicing app lets you add customers, products, or services and set prices and quantities in just a few clicks. A few more clicks and the invoice is on its way to your customers, alien or otherwise, who can pay directly through the customer portal by selecting their preferred payment method. The invoicing app also allows you to follow the status of each invoice, whether it's paid or not. And best of all, the first app is free for life with unlimited hosting and support. If you're looking for a way to make a smoothly running business feel a little bit less alien, scan our QR code or follow the link in the description below. It's a great way to support the channel. On the 16th of April 2025, scientists reported a high probability that they had found signs of life on another planet. And no, this isn't the start to a sci-fi story. This is real. The planet in question is K2-18b, a planet more than twice the size of ours, located a mere 124 light years away from Earth. Two chemicals, dimethyl sulfide and dimethyl disulfide, were spotted in the atmosphere of K2-18b thanks to spectroscopic readings taken by the powerful James Webb Space Telescope. Why does this matter? On Earth, these chemicals are only produced by living things, generated as waste by bacteria and phytoplankton. There were over 20 times more of these gases on K2-18b than we see even on Earth, and they were identified with a 99.7% confidence. So this result is perhaps the strongest sign yet that we are not alone in the universe. There's a very real chance that K2-18b is teeming with life. Of course, the universe is a vast place, and perhaps there is another explanation for the presence of these chemicals. This does not prove aliens for sure. Still, 124 light years is not really that far away compared to the rest of the cosmos. If life is really there, which is a mind-boggling thought, it really makes you wonder, how implausible is it that alien life from this kind of planet somehow found its way to Earth? Perhaps the odds are not so out there. At least, so say the United States Congress. Because, according to them, we've known about non-human intelligences for a long time. They are already here, and the US military has been covering it up for decades. I'm Alex McColgan, and you're watching Astrum. And in light of the recent UFO day, it's time to take a closer look at the very real battle raging right now between the US Pentagon and Congress over the alleged existence of alien spacecraft. Congress seems certain that the military is hiding retrieved alien technology, and the Pentagon is not doing a very good job at proving them wrong. But why do I say that? Well, let's start at the beginning. Those of you that are long-time viewers of this channel will remember that back in May 2023, we did a video on the US Congress's resurgence in interest in the topic of UFOs. It's a topic that carries a lot of stigma. People who claim to have seen flying saucers are often treated as a little bit delusional. the whole thing feeling more at home as an urban legend. And yet, in 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a report on Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, UAP, that made the whole thing seem much more mainstream. According to the government report, UAP, a less stigmatized acronym than UFO, but referring to the same sorts of things, were real and were messing with America's Navy pilots. Their frequent appearance in US airspace and training areas clearly pose a significant safety of flight issue and may pose a challenge to US national security. To be exact, they were getting so close to US jets that pilots sometimes had to swerve to avoid them. In 2022, in an open congressional hearing, high-ranking members of defense and naval intelligence told Congress that this was happening frequently enough that it had become important to find out what these things were. This was no easy task, as UAP came in many different varieties, and so presumably required different explanations. Some were drones that followed Navy ships for hours. Some were orbs photographed outside of cockpit windows, and some seemingly exhibited strange flight characteristics that couldn't be accounted for. Incredible top speeds that broke the sound barrier, yet created no sonic boom. Being able to accelerate and turn on a dime in a way no fighter jet could hope to match, or hovering motionless in the face of high winds with no visible means of propulsion. It was these that had Congress and the Navy worried. While the others could possibly be explained as enemy spying action or simple weather balloons blown off course, some of these hinted at an intelligent force with a technological advantage over the US, and the Navy had no idea who was operating them or what their intentions were. Congress ordered the Pentagon to create a new department called AARO, or the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, in July 2022, and tasked them to use a data-driven and scientific approach to figuring out what UAP were. AARO set to work and quickly identified 510 cases of reported UAPs, such as the curious and inexplicable Mosul orb, which was seen flying over a war zone in Iraq. However, Congress became unsatisfied with the answers that AARO was giving. AARO's first hearing in April 2023 downplayed the anomalous aspects of UAP, highlighting that they were likely all perfectly explainable with the right data. To many watching on the sidelines, this answer felt like the continuation of a long history of obfuscation and outright deception that had been going on for years. And their suspicions were seemingly confirmed when David Grush became a whistleblower in 2023, claiming that not only did a part of the military know about UAP, but they had recovered them. David Grush was an intelligence officer who worked in the United States Air Force and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency for 14 years. As far as witnesses go, his character and credentials were impressive. His claim was assessed as credible and urgent by the Inspector General of the Intelligence Committee himself. Grush had little to gain from this. He was signing no book deal, and in his career he risked becoming a pariah. Yet he testified before Congress that, in the course of his duties as an intelligence officer, he had learned of a decades-long UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program being run by members of the US government, without congressional oversight. Ironically, for the methodical intelligence officer Grush, this lack of oversight was what he actually had a problem with. Government money being spent without the government's knowledge. Grush claimed that whistleblowers had gone to AARO claiming the same thing, and that AARO had hidden any knowledge of it. Could there be any truth to this? Unfortunately, there's some grounds to be suspicious. The Pentagon has failed every audit of its finances in the 7 years it's been undergoing them, being unable to account for where it spends all its money. So a secret program or two certainly could exist within those gaps. And unfortunately for Arrow, there has been a long history of US government UFO programs hiding facts from the public that made this more plausible. Project Sign, Project Grudge, Project Blue Book, investigations that dated back to 1947 all came under fire for being more designed to downplay UFOs than to investigate them. And these criticisms even came from the scientists who had run them. For example, one night in 1966, police in Ohio spotted an egg-like object over 10 meters across with a cone of light beneath it, flying 100 meters off the ground and glowing brightly enough to illuminate the surrounding area. The object flew over the policeman, stopped, then continued on its way. The police decided to give chase to the egg, but every time they got close, it would dart away, although it would allow them to catch up again, almost like it was waiting for them. In this way, the two policemen chased the object 100 kilometers across 2 states until eventually, just as dawn was arriving, the object shot straight up into the sky. The official report from Project Blue Book? This object was Venus, which had been misidentified by the policeman. An explanation that was hampered when the lead scientist of Project Blue Book, a man named J. Allen Hynek, claimed that he hadn't even been asked his opinion before the department made its announcement. And also, Venus was in the wrong part of the sky for this to make any sense at all, on the horizon rather than overhead, and it was seen at the same time as the object. Some critics labeled Blue Book as the Society for Explaining the Uninvestigated, due to some of the outrageous explanations they asserted for some of what they saw. Feeding into this suspicion of a cover-up were the very real events that took place across 2023 and 2024. You may have heard of the Chinese spy balloon that flew across the US in February 2023 before finally being shot down over the ocean. There are plenty of excellent images of this 60-meter tall balloon, and wreckage was collected from it after just a day. What is harder to find images for are the 3 other objects that were spotted on military radars soon after, which were also shot down. But while the military was quick to provide excellent images of the first balloon, or a Russian jet clipping a US drone just a month later, no images were released of these other 3 by the American government, and despite an intensive hunt, all 3 were never recovered. Canada did release a very grainy image of one of the objects, and a story soon circulated that one of these car-sized floating objects was likely a hobbyist balloon, but the lack of detail surrounding it and the others left many feeling gaslit. Everything is fine. These are explicitly not aliens, but we don't know who they belong to. A similar thing happened in 2023-2024 when drones started appearing over military bases such as Langley or American bases in the UK, where the US were storing nukes or advanced jets. Although these were most often reported in the media as happening in New Jersey, they actually occurred the world over. Here's one that was sighted near Australia in March 2025. It shares a passing resemblance to the one that was seen over New Jersey. While many assumed that this was the work of foreign adversaries such as Russia or China, the government at the time said it was actually authorized by the FAA. But it certainly doesn't seem that way. After all, if the FAA were the ones authorizing the drones flying over sensitive air bases, why did the FAA go as far as to temporarily restrict drone flights as a way of combating them? Why fight yourself? And why weren't the military told? And why were the drones impossible to catch or detect on radar, even in the face of the US military's desire to do so? And why were they shining lights as they flew? Almost like they wanted to be seen. Drones the size of SUVs, appearing the world over and evading capture while investigating sensitive military sites, certainly sounds like this is not just the work of hobbyists. Were they technologies belonging to another country? Perhaps. But the secrecy has apparently been enough that Congress is getting fed up with all of the stonewalling. Soon after Grush's testimony, Congress passed a law ordering the Pentagon to hand over all of their files pertaining to UAP, especially anything to do with non-human intelligence or recovered craft. The fact that a bill contains the phrase non-human intelligence passed into law is astounding. The fact that there were efforts to block it is concerning. After all, why try to avoid handing over something unless you actually have it? In the most recent UAP hearing in 2024, members of Congress claimed that they were facing opposition to having these hearings, and the Pentagon was refusing to hand over data such as satellite footage. And yet, more and more high-ranking, current or retired military officers are coming out and repeating this same story. Admirals, NASA administrators, again and again, the claim is coming forward that members of the government are hiding something. The recent congressional hearing even put a name to this secret program, Immaculate Constellation, and claimed that military servicemen actually have been hurt from the interaction with UAPs. And that was one of the milder claims. In the Immaculate Constellation report, there are accounts of F-22 jets being boxed in by a flight of 3 to 6 orb UAPs, which perfectly remained in formation with the helpless jet before ultimately driving it from the mission area. Another describes a softly glowing orange orb that approached a US vessel, causing those who watched it to experience altered perceptions of time. When it left, the crew snapped out of a trance before feeling a sweeping wave of profound unease. One last account describes a 200 to 400 meter wide saucer UAP that was seen on infrared satellite footage skimming above thick cloud cover. Apparently noticing it was detected, this football field-sized behemoth then dipped below the clouds again, vanishing from sight. Sadly, other than the report itself, there was no proof given that any of this was actually true. No footage, no testimony. But just as the script for this video was being finalized, ufologist Jeremy Corbell released a purported Air Force UAP video taken by an infrared satellite, and it bears a passing resemblance to one of the Immaculate Constellation accounts. Take a look at this. Here, the object is moving down from the top of the screen before veering to the right. From the size of the clouds, it is clearly a massive sphere or disk, but its 90-degree change in direction suggests it's no balloon or an object blowing in the wind. If Corbell is correct, and this footage is real, it lines up perfectly with the Immaculate Constellation claim of the Behemoth UAP. I also did find at least one instance of a podcast made in collaboration with NASA where the subject was UAP. Ecosystemic Futures positions itself as a conversation with the experts at the cutting edge of technology in the quest for innovation. The whole podcast episode 69 if you're curious, was an interesting dive into possible emerging tech. But without going into everything that was discussed, one of the guests, Richard Van Durick, a former electrical engineer and mathematician, and now CEO of Field Propulsion Technologies, very casually claimed to have been part of a public sector UAP reverse engineering company. He described smart materials that he had been tasked to investigate that turned to dust if you interacted with them. If alien craft exist, they apparently don't want their technology reverse engineered, it seems. And he calmly detailed his attempts to study triangular UAP that could turn invisible at will. His claims in this podcast were taken as completely reasonable. And while it's easy to make claims like this, The setting the claims were being made in was the surprising part. I hadn't expected NASA to collaborate on a podcast that had guests making claims of this nature, as it implied a subtle, tacit approval for what was being said. Sadly, Congress has not published its own proof of its Immaculate Constellation claim, and here we reach the end of what can be found in the public congressional record. So, let's take a moment to review. Judging by their complaints, and in a rare case of bipartisan feeling, members of Congress are uniting in the apparent belief that their own military is hiding something from them. Of course, they are privy to things we cannot see, so whether you believe them or not comes down to how much faith you put in their interpretation of those classified documents and videos and their own agendas. But it is certainly true that there are objects in our skies that we cannot explain. Although not necessarily aliens, there are unusual craft in our skies, and if the government knows what they are certainly not telling us. Whistleblowers have made claims that some of these are non-human. Of course, witness testimony is the worst kind of evidence. People can misremember things or interpret what they saw according to their own biases, if they're not outright lying. But another proof is lacking. While there are military videos that have been released that show something, none of these are the high levels of fidelity that we know the military is capable of, which is a little frustrating. But for certain, we have no UFO lands next to the White House and alien shakes hands with the president video that settles the question forever. We have the testimony of credible witnesses such as David Grush, but he has only claimed that he was told UAP exist. He never claimed to directly see one. We have evidence of the Pentagon stonewalling and obfuscation. Some of that is to no doubt protect sensitive military assets, either secret new technologies such as US stealth bombers, or sensitive devices that did the data collecting that the Pentagon doesn't want everyone to know that they possess. But while this explanation is good reason to keep it from the public, it's not a good reason to keep it from Congress, who are the ones paying for it all, and Congress are the ones feeling stonewalled. As a side note, while not everyone in Congress is informed about every secret program, a few select congressmen are. The House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. That's how it's supposed to work. These congressmen being read in so that they can oversee what the Pentagon is doing, maintaining a level of secrecy. So if this was all just secret Pentagon technology, all that would be needed is a quiet word in those ears, and those committees could tell the rest of Congress that this was one of ours. Please don't draw attention to it. All this public attention could simply go away. So the explanation that this is secret US tech that the Pentagon isn't telling Congress about doesn't make sense to me. I could buy the idea that the Pentagon does not want to publicly acknowledge they don't know what this is, or that another country has a technological advantage over the US for fear of inciting panic, but that is straying into speculation. When the facts are reviewed together, it certainly feels like something is going on. To sum it up in the words of the then Senator Marco Rubio, either what the whistleblowers are saying is partially true or entirely true, he said, or we have some really smart, educated people with high clearances and very important positions in our government who are crazy and are leading us on a goose chase. There is not a clear reason why many of these whistleblowers who are actively serving in distinguished careers would want to jeopardize their reputations. While some UFO enthusiasts have made money off discussing the topic, people like David Grush had no book they were trying to sell. Perhaps what would be helpful to hear is evidence from someone who actually was part of the secret government crash retrieval program itself. a whistleblower with footage of what they saw from much closer up. As it happens, we have an example of that. Although, I will warn you, this is both less substantiated and an example of where ufology can get seriously weird. Let's talk about Jake Barber. A lot of the big names in UAP circles started making a big fuss back in January 2025 about a big revelation that was about to take place. A whistleblower was coming forward with unprecedented levels of information by the name of Jake Barber. Like Rush, Barber claimed to have worked on classified projects for the government. But unlike Rush, Barber claimed to have been a pilot working within one of those programs. And although he claimed that there was a danger to his life, he felt that the footage and information he held needed to come forward. Congress has not officially vetted Barber, nor do we have proof that he was working on this program at all. Of course, such is the nature of clandestine programs. They are, by nature, difficult to fact check. We should likely take what he says with a grain of salt. However, what he claims is certainly interesting. Barber claimed that he was a pilot who would sometimes transport highly sensitive objects from one location to another. On one such mission, he flew his helicopter to an unspecified patch of desert, only to find a large egg-shaped object there. While approaching this egg to transport it, Barber felt an overwhelming emotion come over him. He felt sadness, happiness, and the feeling that something had connected with him on almost a spiritual level. It was guiding him, and the whole experience was so overwhelming that he began to cry. He pulled himself together and continued the mission. Later, he claims that other personnel confirmed to him that what he encountered was a UAP. Apparently, the military transported these egg-shaped UAP often, and this footage came from one of those other missions. And Barber himself claims to have not just encountered UAP once. In a later mission, Barber claimed that exposure to a UAP, or possible reverse engineering technology from a UAP, led a doctor to conclude he was suffering from the hallmarks of radiation poisoning. The doctor in question was Gary Nolan, another ufologist, but one who is a professor in Stanford with an extensive background in immunology and cancer research. Later, Barber left the military and together with other business partners founded the company Skywatcher. Rather than force the military to divulge what it knows in its clandestine programs, Barber is now trying to replicate the results in the private sector. But the method he is using is surprising. He and his team are not just using cameras or radar, but are attempting to connect to UAP psionically, using their minds to reach out to UAP in the same way Barber claims that the first UAP connected with him. According to Barber, there are many people capable of doing this, and for whatever reason, whatever the true nature of UAP, many of them seem to want to be connected to in this way, and if you do it right, they are willing to come out to play. Through a mixture of on-site psychics and the use of an electric signaling device they refer to as a dog whistle, Barber's team claims that they can successfully call UAP to their location with a near 100% success rate, an extraordinarily high number, making this an extraordinarily bold claim. There is footage. It is grainy, and when I look at them, at least a couple seem likely to be birds or balloons. But this tactic of psionics and dog whistles is the method that Barber claims the US government is using, and is the way that the first UAP egg was called down to land in the first place. I've often heard the argument that if UAP are so advanced, why do they keep crashing on Earth? This, allegedly, is the answer. What evidence do we have that this is true? Well, It is a documented fact that the CIA did run a psionics program running from 1975 to 1995 called Project Stargate. CIA agents recruited those who were psychically gifted and attempted to use them to remotely view targets of interest amid fears that the Russians were doing the same. While this might sound extremely out there, consider that, unlike the UFO projects Sign or Grudge, which only ran for a few years, Stargate went on for 20 years. That implies they felt they were onto something. They also did claim some successes. Former President Jimmy Carter spoke of an incident where a crashed plane went down in Central Africa. American satellites couldn't locate it, but apparently a remote viewer was able to do so. After going into a trance, the woman wrote down some coordinates, and there the plane was. Whatever you think of the truth behind psychics and remote viewing, the idea that the American government also attempted to reach out to UAP using psionics is actually pretty believable. What's a lot harder to swallow is the idea that UAP responded. Still, a good scientist does not dismiss something simply because it seems outside our comfortable worldview. So, in an effort to be scientifically rigorous, I decided to test the hypothesis for myself. Together with my brother John, who helped write the script for this video, we set out to call down a UAP using this method. We travelled down to the coastline of South Wales, as some reports associate UAP with large bodies of water, and we hoped that there wouldn't be too many people around. The weather was cloudy, but there were large patches of blue sky as the day progressed. The method we were using was something known as CE5. Apparently Barbara is not the only person out there claiming UAP can be contacted psionically, but there are many who say the same, and there is a whole published methodology explaining how to do it. There's some variation in the execution, but the idea is simple. Meditate, clear your mind, then in a spirit of goodwill, ask mentally for UAP to come to you. We went during the day, as we hoped to catch better images than just a little light in the sky. To that end, I brought along my Sony A1 camera with a 600mm lens. John was going to be our psychic for this attempt. He had never done something like this before, but was willing to give it a try, and I would capture an encounter, if anything happened, on film. We set up our camp. John got to meditating, and we began to wait. We didn't talk much. We kept our eyes on the sky and the horizon. Apparently, it's all about the headspace you're in, and although I did find myself a little skeptical that anything would actually happen, I did try my best to keep an open mind. And after a few hours of waiting, we found nothing. No spheres or triangles in the sky. No outrageously fast spacecraft, not even any balloons. Although I did capture a few nice images of some birds, which is the real reason I bought that camera in the first place. I'll admit, we were both a little disappointed, and I went down to the beach to look for rocks of interest. John stayed out another half an hour longer, but eventually even he faced the reality of the experiment's failure. It would have been cool to see an alien spacecraft, but sadly, this does not actually prove Barbara wrong. It, of course, might just prove that we are not very proficient at the process, or maybe we lack the knack for it, or maybe there was simply no UAP to call. The one thing that did happen that was a little odd was that John woke the next day to find he had been surprisingly sunburned. He also had a headache and a resurgence in an eye infection. While this could have been the signs of radiation spewing UAP hovering somewhere just out of sight, I lean towards a good old-fashioned sunstroke. It was a cloudy day, but John does burn easily. But I have the same skin as him, and for the record, I was fine. So where do we land with all of this? When it comes down to it, many of the claims surrounding UAP seem to boil down to a question of belief. A majority of Congress believes Grush, who in turn believes his sources. Barber believes that you can psychically connect to UAP. Arrow believes that what lies in the unknown is innocuous. Every example of an inexplicably fast UAP is actually a sensor error, or just an optical illusion at work, but that's just it. This is anomalous. It exists at the edge of our senses, in the files of secret government agencies we suspect exist. Could it be true? Absolutely. But could it all genuinely prove to be nothing more than an unexpected balloon, or a hoax, or some emergent technology that one branch of the American government isn't telling another about? Also, absolutely. Until we shine more light on it all, it's really hard to know the truth either way. All you have is probabilities. At the beginning of this video, I told you that we probably have found signs of life on another planet. This too is an unknown. I find the idea of life being out there somewhere exciting and fascinating. The idea that some of that life has found its way here, it could revolutionize everything. But it's important to exercise caution and to not let what we want to see cloud our view of what we can say with certainty. The governments of the world are absolutely hiding something. That really shouldn't be a surprise. And there may indeed be a there. But until the mysteries are all finally solved, whether you think the answer to it all is alien craft, or beings from another dimension, or angels and demons, or just ordinary men keeping ordinary secrets, keep an open mind. One day the answer will be revealed. No secret organization can keep the truth suppressed forever, and things exist out there that can always surprise us. Throughout human history, much thought has gone into what alien life might look like. Sometimes they are depicted as grey-skinned humanoids with large eyes, sometimes as strange tentacle monsters. But ultimately, while this is an interesting question to consider, it's not really the most important one. For there is a far more pressing consideration we need to talk about if aliens actually do exist. Namely, if we encounter aliens tomorrow, what might we expect them to do? While this may seem like an idle question, our survival as a species might depend on us knowing the answer. Because if aliens do exist, by the time they find us, it will be too late to consider it. By then, it might be too late to do anything at all. This is a question that determines our species' destruction, or maybe our salvation. I'm Alex McColgan and you're watching Astrum. Join with me today as we see what we should do when approaching the search for alien life. Because depending on the answer to this question, we have some vitally significant choices ahead of us as a species. And seeing as this is a question that scientists and political leaders are not yet considering seriously, let's have a go at it on this platform. For this video, I will draw on some of the ideas and knowledge we've explored so far in the other videos in this series, so if you haven't seen them, then you might want to check them out using the link above. If our speculations on the behavior of hypothetical aliens are to be useful to us, they need to be grounded in real observations as much as possible. For instance, we know that life can arise in the universe, because it did at least once with us. We know that we can see no signs of any other alien life, an idea we have considered with the Fermi paradox. So any behavior we look at has to line up with this fact. And we have considered how, when species evolve, form follows function. The same evolutionary imperatives that drive us likely would drive other species too. In all probability, everyone needs to eat or reproduce in one way or another, or they would likely all die out. So, although we don't know for certain that alien life is even out there, let's bring these ideas together. In doing so, we gain some revealing insights. To begin with though, let's hold up the mirror to ourselves. We are the only instance of life arising in the universe that we know of. The great human experiment of civilization has been going on for thousands of years and has produced many different types of society: capitalist, socialist, hunter-gatherer, nomadic, and theocratical, to name just a few. If we want to understand the behavior of alien civilizations, we need to consider societies. We thus have quite a few ideas to compare when considering how aliens might behave. Broadly speaking though, let's examine two great extremes and see how they might influence alien civilization. These two extremes are altruism and aggression, love and violence. Let's start with violence. While this may be a pessimistic starting point, it is sadly one we must consider, because as human civilization has developed throughout eras, different groups of humans have almost always clashed violently. This ties into the evolutionary idea that competition always occurs when there are more organisms than there are resources. Humans are organisms, and we need resources to survive. And so, all too often, war throughout the ages has been fought over resources. Agricultural land, people, and all the labor power and industry they can produce. Gold, oil. Even when a civilization develops space travel and reaches for the stars, this issue will still likely exist. After all, we are nearly at the stars ourselves, and there certainly seems to be no shortage of violent conflict amongst us today. So, with a sample size of exactly 1, we have to at least consider the possibility that the other alien races are the same as us, driven by a need for resources to support an ever-growing population. Of course, when it comes to societies, there are even more reasons why clashes might occur. For instance, religious or ideological differences. The Cold War was largely fought between countries that espoused different political ideologies, capitalism and communism, that threatened each other. Alien civilization might equally differ from us ideologically. In fact, it would be surprising if they didn't. And so, it's possible they might feel their ideology is threatened in some way by ours. This could lead to conflict too. This is not even to mention the fact that some cultures idolize violence itself, deeming themselves of worth only when they are winning victories, such as Viking raiders or Spartan hoplites. Others seek to build empires, recognizing it's much easier to take wealth from others than it is to build it yourself. All these reasons are perfectly plausible for an intelligent race that has mastered its planet, outcompeted other life forms there, and likely feels good about doing so. Survival feels good. We enjoy feeling strong. But if this leads to conflict, what might an alien conflict look like? Technology raises the stakes. We currently lack the technology to move objects to other solar systems. Given the vast distances throughout space, unless we intend to just throw insulting messages at each other through the void, actual fighting cannot be achieved until we manage to solve speed of light travel, and probably something faster than that. It is possible that one day we might get around this problem, and this instantly opens a dangerous possibility. It is theoretically impossible to move something up to the speed of light because of the link between mass and energy. The more energy something has, the more mass it has, because the two are linked, and thus the more energy you need to increase its speed further. This is only noticeable at relativistic speeds, but it does mean you'd theoretically need infinite energy to move mass up to the speed of light. But if you throw an asteroid-sized object at a planet at near light speed, then all that energy gets released in one go. This kind of strike can easily wipe out all life on a planet, and the people on it wouldn't even see it coming. Any intelligent race would be very aware of the impact potential of objects such as this. For us, we only need to look at the dinosaurs. You don't need nukes or soldiers on the ground to fight an alien war, just rocks thrown really, really fast. This opens up one possible answer to the Fermi paradox. If alien civilizations exist, and any of them prove to be willing to do this, maybe the other aliens realized that it was simply safer not to communicate. Letting other races know that you are there would simply place a target on your back. After all, if you could both do this, and they wouldn't see it coming, could they really trust you not to strike first? They could see us as a risk that they are not willing to take. Known as the dark forest theory, this possible answer to the Fermi paradox says that the only aliens out there are silent simply because they don't wish to be on the possible receiving end of these kind of planet-buster weapons. Like hunters traveling cautiously through a dark forest, they are all either quiet or dead. They have been subject to this selective pressure. However, this is not the only plausible model of behavior that might still prevent us from seeing aliens. The second option is simply indifference. With billions of years of history at play, it might not be the case that we are on technological parity with all the other forms of life that might be out there. Alien life might simply be so far beyond us, they simply regard us as dispassionately as we might an ant. They might not be talking to us because we have nothing interesting to say. Why do you not talk to insects in your garden? The gap is too great. You understand what they want perfectly, and they have no hope of understanding you. Communication would be, frankly, pointless. That said, life might be rare in the universe. If they desire resources and are that far beyond us, they probably wouldn't need to mine our planet specifically. We might have value as a curiosity, something to be left alone to flourish simply because they have decided that we have some value as a specimen in some kind of grand cosmic zoo. And as any zookeeper would tell you, the closer you get an enclosure to look like an animal's natural habitat, the happier that animal normally is. While they might not care about us, perhaps they do not wish to alarm us by stepping into our natural habitat. In fairness, this is a valid line of reasoning. Humanity would likely find it very distressing to learn that we are in fact not at the top of the food chain, and that our very existence depends on the mild indifference of a vastly superior alien race. Of course, if this was true, we would need to be careful. In my home, I was perfectly willing to live and let live when I found ants in my garden. But when ants came into my kitchen, I quickly got out the ant killer. We would do well not to provoke them. Both of these ideas about alien behavior are bleak, so you'll be glad to know that there is one alternative to hatred and indifference. And in fact, it may prove to be the most realistic for higher levels of society: cooperation. Cooperation exists within nature. Not all life competes. Within species, packs of wolves can cooperate to achieve their goals, protecting those within the group even as they attack those outside it. There are giant supercolonies of ants that do this, working together and spanning entire countries, with each hill all considering themselves as part of the same colony. Aggressive to those outside of it, but supportive and even self-sacrificing towards those within. There are advantages to this, as we humans are well aware. We would not have gotten anywhere if we hadn't learned how to work together. Knowledge pooled allows the creation of all kinds of technology. Ironically, no one really knows how to build a computer from scratch, but there are people who know how to build a motherboard, other people who know how to build a screen, and other people that know how to mine the resources. And all these people know that the other people exist, and so can work together. Historically speaking, there is compelling evidence that as time has gone on, we humans have become better at this kind of cooperative thinking too. It used to be that groups of humans were localized into small tribes, fighting other small tribes. However, that elevated to small kingdoms, then big ones, then whole countries and alliances spanning across national borders. Following that to its natural conclusion, at some point, a nation may exist that all humans in the world feel a part of, a unified planet Earth. But why is this a more likely outcome than violence? Simply put, technology forces it. Not only do we remove barriers to communication the more advanced our communication gets, but as our ability to destroy ourselves increases, there simply isn't an alternative except learning how to get along. Other than total annihilation, of course, but that's a pretty unappealing alternative, one would hope. And so, it's possible that aliens develop the same way. If they did, how might they behave towards the universe at large? While they might still be aggressive to outsiders initially, ultimately, they may have attempted to take this to the next level, embracing new alien races as brothers and sisters, part of a great galactic whole. It's just a continuation of the trend. With potentially millions of years of history drilling the dangers of violence into them, they may actually abhor fighting, and there may be millions of aliens of many different races all cooperating peacefully under one banner. Then why don't we see them? Well, perhaps they prefer to let us learn our own historical lessons about the value of cooperation before speaking to us. An aggressive race would not benefit the galactic community as a whole, so until we learn to get along, advanced alien races might not want to share with us their ideas and technology, particularly if such toys could then be used as weapons. Perhaps they believe that we will either figure out how to get along, or else we'll wipe ourselves out. Either way, in the meantime, it is better they stay hands-off. As any parent will tell you, sometimes telling a child something is not enough for a lesson to sink in. Sometimes experience is the only effective teacher. There might be a galactic community out there just waiting to welcome us. Violence, indifference, benevolence. In theory, any of these or all of these in some combination might be the reasons we don't hear from alien life. Ultimately, we would be wise to tread carefully. Meeting alien civilizations might sound exciting, but it would inevitably come with terrible risks. And possibly fantastic rewards. Is it worth the gamble? Thanks for watching. This video was in part made possible by all the astronauts on Patreon. If you think these videos add some educational value to the world and want to give them more stability than the algorithm, you can become a paid member on Patreon to contribute towards their creation. When you join, you'll be able to watch the whole video ad-free, see your name in the credits, and submit questions to our team. Just sign up with the link in the description. Meanwhile, click the link to this playlist for more Astrum content. I'll see you next time.